Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Enrico Biscaro, who's a very interesting man that's been on multiple continents and driven business to new heights everywhere he's been. He's the principal of his own consulting company, Enrico Biscaro. He's also worked in the Middle East, North Africa, Turkey, and India for Baker Hughes, which is a huge oil and gas company. He was the regional product line director across those areas. He's graduated with a Master of Science in Petroleum Geology from University of Aberdeen and also an MBA in Global Business Administration and Management from Thunderbird School of Global Management here in Arizona, not far from my location now. He's also the author of Resonance. And just that term, I think we're going to have fun exploring today. Enrico, glad to have you here.
Well, as you said, namaste, and thanks for having me here, Zen. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So we start out all of our conversations with an exploration into your youth, or at some point in your life when you began to have an inkling that there was something else going on inside of you that was connected to things outside of you in ways you might not have understood but had the experience of. Where did that start for you? And can you describe that, and can you elaborate on where you were at and the kinds of experiences that you might have had?
Oh, very vividly, and I wrote about that in my book. You know, I was in the Boy Scout for about 14 years of my life, my, from where I was 6 until 21. And so I don't remember, but I was probably 7 or 8. So, your memories are quite vivid there. And every summer we would go for a week, 10 days, somewhere in the mountains away from our parents, and we had these young adults or teenager basically taking care of us, right? They were cooking for us, they were organizing the activity for us, they were entertaining us. You need to imagine, there was no TV, no phones, no nothing. So you were away from your family for a week and with a bunch of teenagers that were supporting you and helping you. Some of the most fun I had in my life is from that period, being outdoor and with friends and, without a worry in the world.
Just immersed in nature, huh?
Exactly. Immersed in nature and being outdoor. You quickly realize that there are people, young adults, teenager, that when you grow up and you say, okay, I look at the teenagers, say, oh, they go to the disco or go to the beach in summers, etc. And you look back and you think, well, these guys were spending their time with me. They chose to spend time with me and other noisy and needy kids for 10 days or 2 weeks. And you realize that they served you. They were at your service for whatever time, and they decided to put their time, their effort, because it's not easy. I did it after, right? Because I wanted to do the same. I wanted to serve similar young kids. And it takes effort, planning, dedication. You always need to be upbeat and smile, and that experience at a young age made me immediately realize that in the end, being at service to others, it's really the most important thing. We are in this world not for ourselves, but to help others. And I carry that throughout my career, if you will, because my creed is very simple. Leadership is service. You're not leading because of you. When you lead, you need to give up a few things like self-interest, selfishness, desire to progress. It's all about them. It's not about you. So that's, if you ask me, that to me would be best answer I can give you to your question. When did I find my calling, right? And then of course I use that service in business, because again, I believe that in business it's not about taking care of yourself, but it's taking care of others. Successful business provide a service, right?
Right. Now, when you were younger and going through that process of developing the oriented lifestyle within you, do you remember any of the things that really touched you deeply about an experience with others or even in nature that brought a deeper connection or awareness of that connection to you?
I don't really have an episode that I can recall,
Okay.
right? But
Not
of
everybody does.
course,
Sometimes things come up that, they pop in and they're really vivid and it's just present.
no, but yeah, but you know, the fact that, for example, the connection with nature, right? That then you carry in your business, and of course the importance of, especially in the oil and gas. Trust me, you know, the fact that we're not exactly our brand is not exactly we love the planet and we love nature, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not
But
the poster child for,
we get to that after I answer your question, which is, you know, in the end, the main thing for us was always we leave the place better than we found it, right?
Mhm.
So we should not be seeing us as user, but as keeper for the next generation.
Right.
And for some reason, this works very well with Patek Philippe. You know, you never own this beautiful watch. You just merely keep it for the next generation. Now, I don't know why we don't think about the same for our Mother Earth, right?
Well,
And
indigenous tribes do. And that's one of the things that, for thousands of years and dating back even to the Vedantic philosophy we were talking about earlier of our connectedness to everything. And then not that it was, I don't want to point fingers and identify fault or anything like that. That's not how we need to look at things. We did the best with what information we had, not knowing what future effects might happen. And so now we're kind of going back and trying to correct all of those things, and which is an admirable position to be in.
oh,
And many companies are doing that.
and absolutely. And if you look at, again, now this is a good segue to the oil and gas industry, right? Which if you don't know it, and you know, I had people stopping me, Greenpeace stopping me on the road and asking me to sign this and that, and it was a joke. And my wife always said, you know, why do you even talk to these people? I said, oh yeah, I work for the oil and gas industry. And you always have this thing, oh, you know, here's the devil, now I'm gonna get him. But in reality, because we inside the industry, we understand the impact that we could have, right? And there's been accident, of course, and there will still be accident, but we take this stuff very, very seriously in our industry, you know. And I worked for
Many
Baker Hughes
companies
for
are
20.
transitioning into alternative forms of energy now because of the knowledge of, unfortunately, what's happened.
Exactly. But, you know, okay, take a company like Exxon, right?
Mhm.
You had the Exxon Valdez disaster. It transformed the company completely. You know, I work for, as Baker Hughes, a service company, we work for Exxon. And I can guarantee you, there's not a company on this earth which is more focused on making sure that nothing goes wrong. And so when you do your drilling program, when you work with them to plan the wells, and the question, the focus they have on safety, security, environment is it's you know, over the top,
Right.
to the point that sometimes say, oh really, we went through this 100 times, you know,
Safety
we
first.
still need safety first. And I want to say to all your listener, we in the end we need energy one way or the other.
Mhm.
So you'll never hear from me, no, we need to stop all drilling, stop all exploration, or don't do this, don't do that. It's as you said,
Well, and how many
when
billions of vehicles are on the planet that are fossil, driven by gasoline, right? That's
yeah,
not going
but
to change overnight.
no, it's not just that, but let me switch on the light here. It's a very easy target. But what if I told you that if I snap my finger and tomorrow there's no car on the road, there's no truck, no boat, no plane, no transportation that goes with fossil fuel, you will remove 20% of the consumption globally. So only 20% is used in transportation. So are we focusing on, on where we need to
Right, where
focus,
where
or
the majority there's a huge percentage there that we're not thinking of.
that,
And all of that is, I'm assuming,
yeah,
energy related.
energy related, is you need to make electricity,
Mhm.
you need to make plastic, everything around us, believe it or not. And as when I have discussion with a lot of people, even people that you think would understand this, and people with a university degree like me, or the MBA, and when I say, do you realize that everything you wear, everything you touch is made of plastic, and guess what? Plastic is made out of oil. There's no two ways about it, and
Right.
think about the medical industry. Think about our lives, how much longer they are, and that there's no hospital that does not have a ton of plastic. All the medicine you take, they have some petrochemical component in it. It's probably not what makes you better, but what keeps the stuff together, and
Mhm.
what allows to distribute the medicine and make them cheap for everyone. So when you look at the oil and gas industry, people always think cars, because it's what we are kind of conditioned.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
it's what we notice most, because the rest of it, the energy that we get, the things that we use, the consumer products that we obsess about at times
yeah.
are all possible, and the majority of them are all possible through the petrochemical industry.
So next time that you pick up any food, read the whatever the label. When
Mhm.
it says artificial flavor, okay, artificial flavor comes from petrochemical industry. It's just,
So
we
that could
know
be,
how.
there's also this wave of opportunity and somewhat of a movement, if you will, of moving away from the box, the can, the fast foods, all of those kinds of things, and a return to organic farming. And even large communities like here in Phoenix, there's probably a dozen different farmers markets that people are attending now. And that's, it's a slow shift, but it's moving that direction. And maybe in time, that we can curb that consumerist ideology and go back to a little more of a simple lifestyle, not just because we're desiring it, but because it makes sense.
I'm Italian, so when it comes to food, I like my
Well, me too. I love to cook.
I like my food fresh and from the garden.
Yep.
It's in fact, I'm looking forward to go back to Italy. My dad has got a small garden, and I'm gonna feast on his tomato and eggplant, etc. in a
Mm-hmm.
week. So I'm looking forward to that. And then of course there is the question of, I love farmer market, but we're not at the place where we can feed the world with those, right? You still need.
Oh, not at all. I have a friend of mine actually that's working on that project, and has had some great success with sonification of plants in order to open the stigmata to absorb more nutrients and exponentiate the growth of the plants. Now, he gave me the other day, they have an urban farm here in Mesa, Arizona, that they're using the sonification for, just as a, not necessarily test plot, because they already know it works, but they're working with St. Vincent de Paul to help feed the homeless. And he gave me this zucchini that
Mhm.
was 1.5 feet long and 5 inches in diameter. And this was through the normal cycle of plant growth that they use the sonification for. So this is something that, if an area has been decimated for whatever reason, the restoration of the farms and the plants that feed the people can happen much quicker this way. So it's, and also there's what is the new nomenclature, natural asset company, that has just been introduced by the SEC and FTC as a
Mm.
new area of planetary management, actually. So we're making it strides and efforts. So in this, what are you finding that is an inner drive with yourself and others to move in that direction? And how is that? You mentioned that, from the educational standpoint, you're speaking about it. How is it being received at a more public level with the kind of information that they're hearing from your neck of the woods?
I'm not a big influencer, or my public is very limited, right? But I do believe that you can change one person at a time,
Mhm.
right? And I think that, in fact, one of the reasons why I went into the oil and gas industry, after I pivot, so at the beginning I wanted to look for dinosaurs, right? But what was missing in that was, okay, who do I serve if I look for dinosaur, right? Back to the core.
Right.
And I thought, well, I don't really serve many people. Then I thought, well, everyone needs energy. Everyone wants to have the lights on. It's clear the impact that cheap energy, electricity, keeping the lights on has on people's life. Young children. I came across to the story in India, in this village where they did not have electricity, and electricity came, and suddenly the children could study in the evening, and they could improve their lives just because they had electricity. So that really touched me. So, by traveling the world, and you bring a different culture, a different set of eyes wherever you go, right? And as long as you go into a place knowing that you also have to learn from them, this exchange of ideas and this exchange of information bring exponential growth to everyone,
Sure.
right? So I think that by being a foreigner, but a foreigner who's open to respect for others, then it's where you resonate with people. And so more people start believing that service is important. More people start believing that everybody's equal. More people start to
Mhm.
seeing that it doesn't really matter where you come from. What everybody wants is the same thing. And that, if I, in my life, I can touch 50 people, which I think I have, right? and these 50 people then will touch another 50 each, then even if I'm not a known person, or I will never be famous, or which I don't care, quite frankly.
Right. It really
But
doesn't matter. What matters is that connection and how it ripples through what I call the
exactly,
atmosphere.
and you create a ripple, right?
Yeah.
And me as a person, if you will, I'm the first ripple in the ocean, but that ripple I know is moving and
Right.
is
And you're the
and
ripple
is
of someone else too.
exactly,
Right. We all
exactly.
are this, we're in this massive participatory, life here on Earth. Now, in that process, and one of the things that specifically you mentioned is that getting to know others. In the 80s, when American companies went abroad and they tried to impose the American way of life on other communities in many countries, it didn't work. 80% of them failed because they didn't get in touch with the local cultures and build relationships first before introducing their way of doing things, right? There was this push to thinking that their way was best and not listening to other things. And so that failure caused a lot of learning to take place.
It's funny you mentioned this, because I tell to new leaders, or people that move from being an individual contributor in a company to leading a small team and then a bigger team. Everybody, because that's what you tell, you need to have a vision. When you lead, you need to have a vision. And I said, hold on, you don't need to have a vision, right? You need to win the trust of the people first, because it does not matter what your vision is. You can say that your vision is to, I don't know, cure cancer, but if people don't trust you as a person, they will never believe in your vision.
And when they
So
do, it's a collective vision that all of you build together.
exactly, and that's the co-creation that, if you look and you read some marketing, every brand nowadays is looking for, right? I don't want anymore to create my brand. I want the people that use my product to help me create that brand, because that brand will go much farther, because co-creation can only happen when trust is there.
Right.
So, the message to new leader is, don't put vision in front of everything. Trust needs to come first.
And vision will come. That doesn't mean you can't have vision. However, that vision can be better understood, integrated, expanded upon, even made better with the collective activity.
Exactly.
More heads are better than one.
Oh, in my case, I can witness to that.
Oh yeah, me too. I've been in multiple industries, and the same thing applies. It's not necessarily being a leader, it's being a facilitator, being one of the group that just knows how to facilitate that interaction to achieve cohesion of the group. And then it kind of leads itself to what makes sense because you ask the right questions and how to get there.
Absolutely. I always like to imagine the first human around the fire, and everybody would say, if I ask 9 people, 10 people, oh, the leader is the strongest, or the guy that can, launch his spear farther. And I always say, well, really, I think the leader is the person that can tell better story. I think the leader is the person that can, through story, explain how you go hunting. What have we learned today from the hunt, or whatever. that is leadership, the ability to coalesce and have people coalesce around a common objective, right? And I think that storytelling has been always central in human history to achieve that. I think the best leader must have been the people that could tell the better story.
And words, wordsmithing, the nature of words affect each word that you speak has a vibration to it. The clearer you
Absolutely.
speak, the more emotionally intelligent, we used to call it interpersonal skills, right? The more emotionally intelligent you can speak to anything, the more sensitivity, the more empathy can be applied, the more understanding evolves, and the more willingness people are to be vulnerable enough to trust you in the process.
Absolutely.
You built it in the way you've communicated with them, as well as your actions. Your actions have to back up your words. And that trust builds over time in that, and people, happy people, this is what I love to say, happy people get more done with less supervision and will exceed your expectations given the right training and tools.
This is absolutely 100%, and that's why these days, there's so much focus on engagement and morale, but
It wasn't that
I've learned,
way in the 80s.
yeah, I've learned this very early in my career. I mean, and I still, maybe I'm like, I don't know, sometimes I struggle that we still need to tell, oh, an happy person will be more productive than an unhappy person. Oh, really? Okay. As I said, I've never been the sharpest knife in the tool, or I don't consider myself particularly clever, but I don't think you need an Harvard PhD to understand that happy people perform better.
Right. And the way, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, it doesn't matter your intelligence level. The connection comes from your willingness to be vulnerable and share authentically who you are, including your fears. Because when you can do that, then you become more real. You become more human. You become more accessible to others because they feel and hear the same in themselves. And it's just an amazing process that, one of the, I mentioned this before we came on, that, we can't think our way through a system built on vibration. We have to feel our way through it. We know from quantum physics now that everything is energy. It's vibrations. So how do we navigate through that effectively? And if there is a way to do so, how do we use our bodies to tune into that so that we can be more effective? Like the indigenous folks with the 3-brain system. The first brain's the gut, second's the heart, third's the head. And you process information in that order, where you feel it first, you make a choice of whether it resonates, or not. And then you can choose how to behave with that, rather than have an idea or an agenda and shove it down through your body and wonder why you feel dis-ease.
Yeah, or disconnected.
Yeah. And,
Absolutely.
all of these things, again, that's ancient wisdom that we don't discover until we start asking the questions, usually because our life is so full of trauma that we're like, okay, what else? I've done, help me, kind of. And then that's the place that the help comes. You've got to let go and ask, and it
Yeah,
comes.
it's very important. I think it's very important to understand that the only person who's responsible, it's yourself.
Mhm.
Because when you realize that you're accountable for the way you feel and the way you process information and how that affect your action, and obviously the action have an outcome. Very often it's easy to blame your feeling on somebody else, right? And in business, I always say, when you lead, you need to be accountable without boundaries. When you lead, there cannot be any room for excuses,
Right.
because your team needs to see that your position of leadership come with responsibility.
Right.
And the more the higher your leadership position, the more the responsibility and the more the accountability.
Now, in this
And
leadership, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, and what that does to people, and I've seen it every time, they immediately understand that you're vulnerable, right?
That's a superpower today.
It is, and it's okay, but okay, he's accountable. So if something goes wrong, he's going to lose his job, he's going to lose his career, and in the end, we as human beings are programmed to help others. It's in our firmware. We would not be here if, again, I'm sorry, I like this analogy with our evolution and where we were, but if we had not helped each other, right, we would have never gotten where we are. And I was reading an article, I don't remember the name of the person, but an important anthropologist that was asked, when does civilization start? And she has this picture of a bone that cure itself, right? So you can see civilization when you can find people that were hurt and would have died, but now because the group supports each other, and there's empathy, and there's respect, and there's for the human life, and that's where civilization starts, when we start taking care of each other. And I cannot agree more with that. So when you lead from a place of vulnerability, you do two things. You basically tap into the lizard brain everybody has, that they want to help, they want you to succeed, right? They want you to thrive. And second, you take away the fear, you take away the pressure. Said, anything happen, it's me, it's not you. That when you remove the fear, you let the imagination, the problem solving, the willingness to take risks, you free that. And that's when people go to the moon. That's when people find a way to turn plastic into something that can be digested. These how the big innovation comes, when you remove the fear of the unknown.
Right. And that's what it is. It's the fear of the unknown. Having the ability to, as you said, be vulnerable, be curious. Now, in that curiosity, do you find that there is a transformation in the leadership realm now that's incorporating a more holistic approach of mind, body, spirit, and planet?
I think that everybody knows what needs to be done, but the people that have the reign are resisting to this change, because this change would mean relinquish power.
Do you think that also it could be that people aren't giving themselves permission, right? Even granted, in your position with the leadership teams and the teams you work with, you're able to perform this magic, if you will. On an individual basis, though, how do we give ourselves permission to fail, to make mistakes, and still be responsible, but not get caught up in the self-deprecation and the blame of ourselves when we perceivably, in our own minds, make a mistake?
I think this is different for every people, but when I think about my experience, the fear of failure, it's really mostly external, right?
Mm,
You have a society that tells you that you're successful only if this happens, right?
right.
Um,
And you've allowed that
and
belief system to internalize without much
yeah,
filtering.
exactly. And so, maybe we need to redefine success as a society.
Mm-hmm.
And what is success? Is it success when uh, the share of your company grow 10%, or when the people in your company grow 10%? And that's a very different measure of success that could really
Absolutely.
change.
Well, and there's
That
two,
could
there's two agendas there. There's profit over people and planet, which is our historical efforts. And now there's a switch to people and planet over profit. Doesn't do away with the profit. It redistributes the effort to achieve it and puts it into the realms like we're talking about of empowering people. Because that's the core resource, right? Doesn't matter what the project or what the materials are, it's people who get the job done.
absolutely. And I worked 20 years for a corporation, so I will never tell you that profit is not important, right?
Mhm.
I will never tell you that. I will never argue that it is not important for a corporation to be profitable.
Right.
Uh,
It doesn't
and I
grow if
tell
it's
you,
not.
yeah, and I tell you, people, the people I work with like the company to be profitable because they like the fact that the work they do, the innovation they come up with, are welcome by your customer, and you can outdo the competitor, right?
Mhm.
So there is nothing wrong with being profitable. On the contrary, I cannot find a person that does not want to win
Right.
in business, right? If you're part of the team, you want to win, and if your goal is to make money, well, then that's your win, right? Just like, okay, when you play football, the win is to do a touchdown. Okay, so there's no doubt. But
Now, is there
how?
another side to that in that, for instance, there's an author I'm familiar with, and actually he gave me the moniker of Possibilities Coagulator a decade and a half ago. Dudley Lynch is his name. He wrote Strategy of the Dolphin back in the 80s, and then in the late 90s, I think he wrote Mother of All Minds. And in Mother of All Minds, he states that humanity basically has had an alpha brain and an alpha body, steeped in competition. So this is last century and prior efforts. Now there seems to be a presence of a beta mind, which understands oneness, doesn't necessarily know how to implement that, but at least understands it. We still have the alpha chassis. So I'm under the impression that this alpha chassis now is beginning to change because we're paying attention to the sensory capacity that our bodies have now that we're exploring this self-awareness notion that's only been present in maybe the last century. Does that seem like what's happening in your world, where there's, again, a more holistic approach, the beta mind, precipitates the holistic approach of inclusion of body, mind, spirit, and planet, possibly even cosmos, in the consideration of how business is moving forward. Is that becoming present, in your opinion?
I am not sure, but certainly what is becoming present is that the old set of value that the only important thing is to work, 16 hours per day and make money, is not the only value. And if the beta mind is spending more time at home with your family and having more time to do what you like, whether it's yoga or running or being out with friends and that is now more important than the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
The job now is not the most
Not
important
more
thing.
important, maybe equally so to begin with, because there's got to be the work-life balance.
Yeah, but you see and that's the other big topic that you read and explore everywhere, work-life balance. And in the end, if success, I think we're seeing a switch where time is a bigger asset than money. Right? Well, we always said time is money. And I think now people are like, well, if time is money, I'd rather you give me time than money.
Right.
And with that time, I will achieve my work-life balance, and I'm sure you are familiar with the pyramid of need, Maslow, as long as I have food on the table, a roof on my head, then I'm okay,
So
I
we, based on that, is that something that maybe business and industry needs to focus on first, or maybe redirect their attention toward, so that then that freedom can be more expressive?
I think if you want to attract talent these days, you need to be more focused on the work-life balance, to call it in terms that everybody would understand, right? And then whatever people or whatever individual thinks about work-life balance is, then in the end, this can be achieved in the time you're not working, right? So as a company, right, and all the discussion about remote work, and again, COVID made this very, very relevant. Remote work, or I don't know, why
That
on
was the trigger
LinkedIn,
for the big shift. By whatever
why
name you want to choose, whether it's the resignation or whatever, doesn't really matter what we call it. There's a shift happening.
there's a shift happening, and I think there's a very, very clever negative branding in the quiet quitting denomination, right? And of course, if you call something quiet quitting, quitting is negative. So if you are a quiet quitter, you're a bad person, right? But what if we call it, I wouldn't call it quiet quitting.
Well, it's like we were talking right before we came on, was, COVID gave the opportunity for people to self-obsess on their hygiene in a different way with the sequestration, because who you got to talk to? Just yourself, right? So how are you going to change that? You don't like what's happened, and it gave people the opportunity to go within and question, okay, what do I really want out of life? Who do I want to be? How do I want to treat my friends and family? How do I want to express that? And what kind of work am I really comfortable with? So it gave people a chance to take their skill set and look for other ways of applying it.
No, and quite frankly, I don't buy all these people on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn telling you, oh, can start a business and make six figure on your own for free. But certainly, in terms of strategy and what they teach you in any MBA, the cost of entry into a business today is much lower than it was before. Now we can start talking about ChatGPT and all this stuff. So
What a tool.
if you have something that people want, if you think you can solve a problem, right? These days is much easier to start your own business than it was 10 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
With the presence of the internet, the ability to reach a huge audience globally.
For instance, I did a show like this in the 1990s. I had a full studio, 7 people as crew, right? Now it just takes me.
And just take one person, and so now you have a lot of young kids, right? And today I was discussing, the restaurant is closed because they cannot find waiters. Well, why is that a surprise? Why would I go and wait table for minimum salary when I can do something I enjoy and make more money, right? So absolutely, I don't understand why employers are surprised that people don't want to work for them anymore.
Well, and used to be you don't leave a job because you don't like your job or the money. It's because you don't like who you're working for, right? It's your boss.
Exactly. And what I always say, back to the accountability without boundaries, if people don't work for me, I never ask myself, oh, good, you don't deserve me, or good riddance or whatever. I said, what have I not done to gain your trust and to stay and work for me, right?
Right.
I think I think I think a lot of company lack that self introspection, say why people don't want to come to work for us anymore.
Well, they used
Well,
to the management by walking around, right? That's advanced to participatory management now, where you actually get
absolutely.
involved and you do the same things. You jump in because you understand the business well enough, and you work side by side, at least for a moment, right? And establish that relationship with your employees, that you're there with them. You're not above them. They're not below you. You are of equal importance.
I can tell you, I never had a success in business with an idea that I came up with. That I can guarantee you that it was always somebody else. I think your skill as a leader comes in the question you ask, because once you've established trust, I want to go back to that, then they allow you to ask questions. They allow you to ask difficult questions because they know you're not asking just to reply, but you're asking because you're really interested to listen. And again, that knowledge allows people to go and explore places where they would never go if they would not feel safe around you, right?
Right. Absolutely. Now, in that feeling of safety and the way things are rapidly changing in the world, even Schwab, in his book, COVID-19, the Great Reset, he asked a very important question about individuals. And that's, can we be caring and compassionate toward one another coming out of COVID? And I think the answer to that is a resounding yes in many places now, because there's that effort, there's a choice made, like you're saying, to be vulnerable, to lead with a sense of authenticity and resonance that you develop with those around you. It's not necessarily, although there's a hierarchy, it's not necessarily pyramidal anymore. The silos are even disappearing between companies and organizations, where there's a better understanding of, oh, if we work together to solve this problem and we share technology, then we can meet the demands of the people and planet much faster, such as in what's happening with climate right now. And we talked about that. There's this, not only the efforts that I don't say efforts, the misguided activities that have caused the pollution of air, land, and water currently, that we want to ascribe climate change to, when there's another side of that story. And as an established geologist and having studied all of this, there's there's a polar shift that's taking place too, that perhaps, do you feel that that's being talked enough about in order to also include, kind of like Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story?
I think that and I had this discussion a number of times, but really, if you look at what's happening, what has happened in the last 50 years, right? You can talk about the Earth axis changing, etc., but geologically, that has never impacted the climate in the span of the 100 years that we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
These big changes are happening since the start of the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. So there is no record there's no evidence in the geological record that climate change so abruptly. It takes hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions. So this argument, as a geologist, I don't buy in the argument that the Earth axis rotation has anything to do with what's happening, with what we are experiencing in our own lifetime. That there's no scientific evidence for that. So we can talk about.
We don't have a history to actually look, the ice.
No, but we do.
And things like that. We've never had the presence. Well, but have we had a civilization of our size and capacity in the sampling of the ice cores?
But in the ice core, we have the evidence of the temperature as recorded by the oxygen isotope. Sure. So we know exactly how long it took for the Earth to cool down and warm up. And we're not talking about 200 years here. We're talking of hundreds of thousands of years. So if you want to look at the data, at the numbers, and you want to inform yourself, everything is out there. But I cannot guide you through that, because then you will say that you're biased and you want to sell me what you believe in. But
we're not going to sell anybody anything. That's, we're wanting to discover the truth, the reality that we can at least perceive is possible. And then, because it's so ultimately potentially devastating to the human race, what can we do to either circumvent it or begin to repair the damage that we've done?
So I personally think that as a species, that we evolved so quickly. If there were consensus, and I mean political consensus, we would find solution very quickly. And I give you an example that happened in the 80s. I think Reagan must have been president in the United States. Remember the ozone layer,
right?
And that was a big risk for humanity, because if you lose your ozone layer, then your ultraviolet will come in, and basically that would be the end of it.
That's about the time that the military started doing their chem sprays, and the HARP system came on board to avoid that.
And
And we think it's
and
all a conspiracy theory that they're trying to poison us. Well, they'd be poisoning themselves too. That doesn't make
yeah,
sense.
and that they say, okay, what's the problem with the ozone layer? They identify the root cause of the problem. They fix the root cause of the problem. They found an alternative of that chemical that was harmful to the ozone layer. So
Mhm.
through technology, we found an alternative, and it was fixed. And of course, the people that were selling that particular chemical were against it, and they tried to, this is not our fault, etc. It's happening the same thing with the climate change, right? But for some reason, something has changed from when that happened to now, whether we don't seem to find a consensus around scientific data anymore.
Right. So in your industry, is there a consensus on how to move toward a future of being able to provide energy and I realize, the oil and
Oh,
gas industry, that's big bucks, right? So you've got the money to put towards alternative methods. Do you see that happening a lot?
oh,
Okay.
absolutely. In some company faster than others, but every company has these days as an energy transition program. And I'll be honest, they don't have it out of their own good heart, because they
Hmm.
think they, as you said, they are the people with the cash to invest in research and development. So when this whatever new technology is, they will be able to sell it, right?
Right.
So it's certainly important to recognize that uh, we need this company to be on board, right? We cannot make that transformation without using the expertise of the energy company. And I think that when people like Baker Hughes, which, as I said, a company I worked for 20 years and I respect, and I really was happy to work with them. They say we were the first one that said we're not an oil and gas company, we're an energy company, because in the end, that's what we thrive for, right? It's kind of saying, okay, do I sell pillow or do I sell a good night's sleep,
Right.
right? And that shift is slowly happening. Some companies, because they're bigger, they're more resistant, but everybody will eventually need to get to get
Right.
to,
And
to
it's
that
funny,
point.
back in, I think it was the late 60s, early 70s, that oil and gas scientists started presenting the detrimental effects to the environment to the CEO level of various oil companies. And a lot of them got fired because of it. Now
you
there's
know
completely switched now that it's like, okay, we have to pay attention to this because our planet is in jeopardy now. And that switch from profit over people and planet obviously is moving toward planet or people and planet over profit. Um, do you feel that that shift is also being driven by the conscience of the new layers of leadership that are taking place in these companies? Because the old guys are dying off, right? And those are the ones that really had the closed minds.
there's certainly there is certainly a component for sure. Well, at least I speak
Well,
for.
you're one of them.
Well, yeah, and there is, but I can say that I was one of them. I have a different business now,
Mhm.
but I can certainly see it in the CEO of the company I work for. He was genuine. It was not just because of it had to be done. I think there's a recognition that also in our industry, and and I was out to hire talents to join our company, and you were at the point where when I started, I just needed to say, come work for us. And I had a line outside the door. Now the people are asking me, okay, if I work for you, what are you doing for the environment?
Mhm.
Right. So it's about, if you want to survive as a company today, you need to be aligned with the value of the people, and
Right.
and
You
more
also
and
don't
more.
want to stand outside of a company with not knowing anything about it other than the narrative in the public and point fingers, because you got three coming back at you. If you're going to want to do something, join the effort, right? Rather than stand back and judge what may or not be happening, get inside and find out. What kind of recommendations or advice can you give to those who are coming into this new era, if you will, of how to apply their skill sets and find a place that they belong?
I go back to the first thing that my mom taught me, right? And I taught my daughter, and the first thing my mom told me says, where are your thoughts, right? And so I pointed in my head and said, okay, well, always think with your own head, right? And that means be critical of the information you receive.
And curious.
Unfortunately, today, I think that a lot of people are losing their ability to understand the information they receive. And therefore, the cognitive bias that we all know exists, they pick the information that confirm their idea rather than use their critical sense to validate the information.
Or look for information that disagrees with you.
Or look
Or the
for
why.
information. Well, my message is, do not lose the ability to have a critical approach to everything. And, to me, that is the biggest risk that artificial intelligence poses to us. I'm using ChatGPT. I find it very clever. I would never, take something that it tells me and cut and paste it and write it, because it still feels mechanical. But the biggest threat of this type of intelligence to me is that people will take for granted the information and will not think twice about using it. And that can create a big problem.
Absolutely. And even ChatGPT says this information may or may not be correct.
That is
we've only got access up to 2021.
Yeah, but you see, there is that, but still a lot of people, right, think that is a great thing. And I always say, when people ask me, artificial intelligence or Elon Musk and artificial intelligence is going to be the end of us and etc., I think I am still more concerned about human stupidity than artificial intelligence.
And from what I've discovered in my discussions with some who have AI patents and work within that realm, that is the case. There seems to be, and even with ChatGPT, I've noticed that there's some emotional intelligence in its responses. Well, if that's there, what else might be? And that, as you were talking earlier, the basic human nature is to want to help each other. So why would that not also be in the basic programming for AI?
It should be. I think that one thing I agree with, the big minds, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, etc., is that that should be a regulation behind artificial intelligence. You know, you should not let everybody just do it. You know, this is like a bit. I think the movie Oppenheimer just got out, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
It's not quite
and
out yet, I think. 24th. So
yeah, it's about to come out,
yeah.
but I think artificial intelligence is. I think I would compare it to was it the nuclear bomb, 50 years ago or 60 years ago, whenever it was invented. This is at the scale that its impact on humanity is so large that you cannot really leave it unchecked and unregulated.
Sure. I totally agree with that. And rightfully so. We should monitor everything that we do in ways that make it better for all of us, not to serve a few.
Exactly. And that's the gist of it.
Mhm.
The many versus the few.
Enrique, this has just been amazing conversation, and we could go on forever. I know with just what we talked about prior to, and yet we got into the depth and expression of humanity in our conversation. And I truly appreciate your depth of understanding, insight, and wisdom in your industry and other places too.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Look forward to sharing you with the world. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
namaste and in la catch. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and I'll see you next time.